Once you've drawn your basic shapes, you may be happy with the actual shape, but you may want to start thinking about the weight of the line around the shape. Now, these are all using the default white fill and black stroke. If I select one of these items, I can increase the stroke size by using my stroke controls up here. But you'll notice it's an even weight around the object. Now, I can use my variable width profile to change that so that it has a variable width. And if I select that and choose my variable width profile, that will affect the line. So you'll see now it's thinner at one end and fatter at the other. But it's very difficult to control that using the variable width profile. So what we're going to do is put that back to uniform and figure out other ways we can adjust the weight of the line. And this is the tool to do it, the width tool. And this is a fantastic tool. Watch what happens. If I want to make it fatter at the corners, I can just move over the anchor point, and let's just zoom in so we can see this a little bit more clearly. And zooming in, I'm using Command+ on the keyboard. Now, before I do this, I should really let you follow along. So if you want to follow along, you can open up Width Tool Superhero Start and follow along with me. Once you have that open, select this shape, this rectangular shape, and then click on the corner and just drag to adjust the width. And you'll notice I've fattened it at this corner, and then it tapers off down to its original width. Now I could also thin it here, so I could bring it down, make it thinner at that corner, so it disappears down to nothing. And we could do the same here, pull it in to thin it, and we'll pull this one out to fatten it. And you can create some really lovely effects just by starting with a primitive shape and using the width tool on it. So we're going to zoom out. Instead of zooming out using the zoom tool, what I'm going to do is open up my navigator palette, because that's going to come in very handy here. So let's open up our navigator. I like to have that as a free floating palette, and I like to make it as big as I can, so I can see a nice big overview of my document. I'm going to close up the layers at the moment. We don't need them open. And let's just place it here, nice and big, and that allows me just to move around my document and select the next shape, which is a circle. Now we can use it on any shape path. So again, if I select my width tool, it doesn't have to be on an anchor point. It can be any point on the circle, and you'll notice I can click and drag that out. Once I've created it, you'll notice as I hover over, it changes to this little symbol. It's telling me the side values as well in a little pop-up. It's telling me the side values in millimeters and the width in millimeters. And I can now adjust those and move them. And you'll notice that as I'm moving them, it's telling me what that adjustment is. So I've got a nice little reference there to tell me. Now, if I actually want to move that along the path, I can't move it by clicking these. That only allows me to pull in and out. If I want to move it along the path, I click to drag it along, and I can change it in that way. Now, I could make some wobbly ones, so I could pull it in there, out there, in there. Whoops, let's go in, out here. So I create these really nice wobbly paths. Okay, so you can create really organic shapes by just dragging the width profiles in and out. Okay, I love this tool. I could sit and play with it for hours, and I often do. So there you go, from a perfect circle, we've just created something more organic. Now it comes in very handy. I'm just going to zoom out. I love the navigator because I can zoom out in increments of 1 rather than using Command+ and minus, which just allows me to go in preset increments. So I just place my cursor into this field here and use the up and down arrow keys to move in increments of 1%. And if I select the width tool here on the spiral, it's fantastic for spirals because I could just pull the width out here and leave it in the middle. And I now get a variable width tapering off as it goes into the distance. So great for creating these kind of 60s spirals. So I can pull out even further and create a really strong graphic image. Now, in previous versions, it would have been quite difficult to do that. So let's move over here to our star and let's zoom in. I'll use the zoom slider just to zoom in a little bit. So here we have our star. What can we do with our star? Well, if I get the width tool and just make the intersections here a little bit fatter. Now, you'll notice as I've done that, as I said, I get a little thing telling me what the distance is. So if I drag it out to around about 10.726, I can then do the same on this one. So try and get it to 10.726 if I can, and then release. Now, you can also use your smart guides for that as well. So if I make sure that my smart guides are actually on, and I can go into my preferences and just make sure that the smart guides are set up the way I want them, I can have my smart guides help me construct things like guides in here. So I could construct some guides at angles and then allow my smart guides to help me to draw these in exactly the right place. But you'll notice that if I click and drag, I can quite easily use this to just make sure that I get the same values all the way around. Okay, it's very hard to talk and to do creative things at the same time. I tend to get a little bit lost in what I'm doing sometimes and get ideas for new techniques while I'm actually drawing, which is great. It's a great thing about Illustrator. So once you have multiple points, you can multiple select them like this. So I'm shift clicking to select the points. Once I've done that, I can click and drag to move them around and start to look at some kind of alternatives for my star, create these kind of curved shapes. Or I could decide, well, I want them at the ends, so I have the fat bits at the ends, and I start to get this blended look. Obviously, if I don't like that, I can drag it back to here again. Now, you have to be a little bit careful with this, because you can get strange little twists happening in the path. So if that happens, just undo a couple of back steps till you're back to where you're in control, and maybe make adjustments manually to those points. Now, it's important to note that if I select this, you'll notice I haven't added any new anchor points. So the width tool doesn't add anchor points, it adds what we know as width points, and they're separate from anchor points. If I was to add one here in the middle of this path, just to have it taper down over time, you'll notice that if I go back to the selection tool, I haven't added another point there. All I've done is added a width point. So important to note that you're not adding new anchor points, which is great because it means that if I want to go in and make a change to this shape just by selecting one of the anchor points, I haven't created any extra points that are going to upset my star shape. So that's a little bit about the basics of the width tool. In the next movie, we'll have a look at how to apply it to artwork.